save us, Warren. That's indeed the truth. The Mac Observer's Mac Geek Gab, episode 835 for Monday, September 28th, 2020. Welcome to the Mac Observer's Mac Geek Gab, the show. We take all your questions, your tips, your cool stuff found. We mix them all together. We add some stuff of our own. The goal being that each and every one of us learns at least 5 new things every single time we get together. Sponsors for this episode include varsitytutors.com/MGG, Otherworld Computing at macsales.com, and expressvpn.com/MGG. We'll talk more in depth about each of those in a little bit here. For now, here in Durham, New Hampshire, I'm Dave Hamilton.
And here in Fairfield, Connecticut, this is John F. Braun.
How goes it, Mr. John F. Braun?
Just, falling into fall.
Falling into fall. Yeah, it's been, unfortunately, we're having a drought in these here parts of New England.
Yeah, we are too.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think all of New England is. But it has created opportunities for some nice weather. So the silver lining is I actually got to play 3 gigs this weekend. Probably the last 3 of the year, given that, outdoors is the only place that those can happen right now. So, or mostly the only place. There's a few indoor venues that work out, but, not most of them. Anyway, we have a big list of things to go through here. Should we start with some quick, easy for me to say, should we start with some quick tips, Mr. Braun? All right, cool. Let's see. All right, we've got quick tips about iOS 14, and then we've got more tips about iOS 14. It's great, and watchOS and all of that good stuff. Michael starts us with a great little quick tip. He says, with iOS 14, there's finally a way to add text to a photo in the form of a caption. When viewing the photo, just swipe up from the bottom of the screen, and there is an Add a Caption field directly below the photo. I thought that was pretty cool, man. I like these little enhancements. Yeah, well, I like the little things that, if you know they're there, they're there. But if you don't, then, that's what quick tips are for. I think Apple has, it's the right way to say this. There are so many features now in the OSs that they can't surface all of them all of the time. Otherwise, you'd have the terribly cluttered user interface that we would all hate, right? But that does sort of create more opportunity for quick tips, so we can all learn what these features are. So, all right, Jeremy has something about watchOS 7. He says, I ran into an issue after I upgraded my Series 5 Apple Watch this weekend and thought I would share. When you restart audio on your iPhone, the watch changes to allow you to control it. This can be turned off, but it appears, at least to me, that there are 2 settings which might be fighting against each other. Either in the watch app on the phone or the watch itself, go to Settings, General, Wake Screen, Return to Clock. Here, you can set it to always return to the clock instead of having a timed delay. But that, he says, isn't enough. You also have to go to Settings, General, Wake Screen, Auto Launch Audio Apps, and turn that off. I'm not sure why telling the watch to always return to the watch with no delay still keeps the audio app on the screen of the watch, but I thought some other listeners would like to know how to get by this. So yeah, that's interesting. So it's Settings, General, Wake Screen, Auto Launch Audio Apps needs to be turned off. Otherwise, that'll just happen, and then your watch face is always that audio app. So thanks, Jeremy. It's good stuff. This is why we do what we do. I'm already learning things. I didn't know about the captures. I didn't know, or the captions, and I didn't know about these audio controls. So, we're almost finished. We almost get to play the theme song, jettison. I wish this one would come to the iPhone, John, but for now, we'll take it. On iPadOS 14, he says it's way less important where apps are, of course, with the app library, but what if I counter that by saying it's more important to have the right apps on the right pages? But where are they to move them? No need. If you search and find the app, then long press on the result of the search and drag. You don't have to find it. It's right there. So I thought that was really interesting. I wish it worked. I can't get it to work on iPhone. If anybody knows how to do that on iPhone, it would be great. But on iPad, it does work. So if you just find it, then you can drag it to wherever you want it to be on your pages. And I think that's pretty awesome. Like I said, I want that on iPhone because there are many apps that I run routinely and I have no idea where they are in the stack. And I would like to surface a couple of them to have them on my few screens that I'm displaying and then not display. I don't think we've been through that on the show. Many of you probably know about this, but on iOS and 14 and iPadOS 14, if you get into, what is it? It's not jiggly mode, is it? Oh yeah. You get into jiggly mode to, get the apps all rolling. And then at the bottom of the screen, above the dock, you'll see the dots of the pages that you have. Tap that and that'll bring up sort of a bird's eye view of all of your pages. And you can check or uncheck the ones that you want to appear. And once you uncheck a bunch of them, when you get to the end of that list, that's where the app library, sort of the auto-sorted thing comes up, and you can search the app library, or you can go with the Apple's auto categorization of things. So that's how you do that. So the bonus quick tip in case you hadn't found that on yours yet. So have you messed with that yet, John?
No.
Really? So you're not using the app library yet?
No, I upgraded to 14, and then the one thing that I liked was that everything looked the same.
Yes, sure, yeah.
Then I started swiping to the right and the left to see some of the new things. Yeah, I got to. I know I can put widgets on the screen, and that they have the categories and all that. Yeah, I haven't really messed with that much. Yeah, using it like I have before.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, right? Because to what I was saying earlier, that there's so many features that Apple, I feel like, especially with these new widgets and such in iOS 14, I feel like Apple could have done a better job of maybe gamifying the onboarding process. Like when you play a game, the first level isn't really to get to the end of the first level. The first level is to teach you the commands and the user interface of the game so that you can get through the second level, right? I feel like Apple could have gamified this and said, hey, do you want to add widgets? Let's, walk you through doing that so that you have some experiential knowledge of this. So, anyway, but I don't know. I guess Apple can't do everything. They leave some of that to us, John. That's what it goes with. You want to, you got one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's one. So Bill says, on Geek Gab 834, you mentioned a new camera setting to mirror the front camera. I don't see this at all. Like you, I have an iPhone 8. So I would think that we'd have the same options. I also don't see the FaceTime eye contact setting that was also mentioned. Is that only for newer phones? Are you guys on the beta version of the next iOS update? Bill's right. And I remember this happening with other upgrades too, is that if your processor, I guess, is not beefy enough, they're not going to include, you don't get certain features. And sure enough, I read about these features, but, had not actually looked to see if they were on my phone.
Sure.
And they're not on my phone.
Got it.
If I had a newer phone, then I think you go to settings camera and you'll see that selector, or go to settings FaceTime and you'll see the feature.
Got it. Yeah. All right, cool. That's good to know. Yeah. Good to know. Cool. Bill found another thing in the UI of the phone, and it is that he was, or of watchOS rather. If you go to Control Center on your watch, he said, scroll down to the end of it, and you'll see an icon that looks like, what did he describe it? He says it looks like Voice Memos, right? But it's not. And for him, and also for me at the time, it was not active. Like I couldn't tap it. Like it was neither on, it was off, but also I could not turn it on. And so I shared a screenshot and posted it to Twitter, and Zach Hall over at 9to5Mac said it's the announce messages with Siri toggle for AirPods and the like. So it's if you have your AirPods in and synced up with your watch, then you can use this to toggle the auto announce messages with Siri feature on and off quickly, which is what Control Center is for. So nice catch, Bill, and thanks, Zach, for coming to the rescue on that one. So that's pretty good. I like it. Yeah, no, I mean that's a cool little feature. So, and I like that they've added it to Control Center there. So it's good. Good. In the last episode, John, we talked about the private addresses that are in iOS 14 and iPadOS 14, and I think even coming to Big Sur potentially. I think I remember seeing that when I was messing with the betas, where when you connect to a Wi-Fi network, your phone comes up with its own seemingly randomized MAC address or hardware ID address so that you can't be tracked from network to network. And we posited somewhat correctly, but without the entire picture, that this would wreak havoc on things like security and parental controls and DHCP reservations and all of that stuff. And Pierre Timo asks, us, he says, I have the Synology router with 2 teenagers in the house. He says, I've enabled the safe access profiles for their devices, both to limit their access to the wrong sites and block their access while they're supposed to be asleep at night. He says, I discovered that my son was in fact online after his scheduled internet time was used up. He says, I went into the router and found another entry for his iPhone, albeit not on the list of his devices. He says, I thought he might have renamed it, thus circumventing the policy rule. But no, he says, you gave me the hint that with iOS 14, there's these private addresses. He says, this is a clear hint to other parents out there. The control we once had is no longer there unless this is disabled. And again, if they discover this as well and reactivate it, then we're back to square one. Well, good news. Many of you pointed out to us that this is it does create a new MAC address, but it is not a truly randomized address. It is randomized based on the SSID to which the network name to which you're connected, and it remains consistent for that network. So, for example, I turned on private addresses, 4 or 5 days ago, and took a screenshot of what my phone assigned itself as its address, and then I turned it off. And I, went about my business for a few days. I restarted my phone in there a couple of times. And then yesterday I turned it back on, John, and it gave me the exact same private address for this network. Right. So, yes, it creates exactly the problems that we found and the ones that Pierre Timo, articulates here. But all is not lost. You have to put in 2 entries for each device, one with the private address, one without the private address, and then you're okay. I mean, it's imperfect, but it does allow you, at least you can set your parental controls and keep them in place. Your DHCP reservations, you would have to have, some routers will allow you to assign the same IP address to 2 different reservations. Obviously, there's reasons that some might not want you to do that. Right? Like you could end up with a real problem. But otherwise, you'd have to, if you want to do DHCP reservations for your iPhones, then you would have to give them 2 separate ones. It's a good way to proceed there. So those are my thoughts. What do you think, John? Anything we're missing on that?
No, I turned it off.
Okay, yeah. But it is on by default. So it is something like if you had parental controls in place for all your devices, any device on iOS 14 has changed. Like unless you go in and turn it off. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as we state, I think it was a bad choice to have that on by default because I'm sure a lot of people were confused.
Yeah. It's tough, right? Because I like
including me. It was like, as soon as I did it, all my, security stuff said, hey, there's a new device. And I'm like, no, there isn't. And I'm like, oh, yes, it is.
Oh, yes, there is.
As far as it's concerned.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm of two minds on this, right? Because for my home network, like or a work network, like things where I'm on it all the time. I trust it. It's fine. Like all good. I don't want this on. I'm totally good with it getting my real MAC address and all of that. But every other network I join, I'm 100% fine with it doing this. In fact, I like that it does it by default. So like, I don't know what the right, again, what the right onboarding process for this feature was. Not talking about it at all, though, is the wrong onboarding process for this feature. Right. So, yeah. But I don't know what the right one was. Like, that's a hard call. So, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
And Dave, there's something new.
Yeah, man.
I've noticed. Just to let people know, iOS 14.0.1 was released at some point last week or this week. As far as I know, so another thing you can do in iOS 14 is you can change the default application for browsing and for mail, I think.
Yep.
There was a bug. So if you selected another one, and I think if you restarted the phone, it would revert back to using Apple's app. So 14.0.1 fixes that. And then another thing I noticed, Dave, which was kind of neat, and a feature I don't think any of us heard about, or at least it was new to me, is in iOS 14, if you copy and paste something, when you paste, it tells you what app that content came from, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, and I
guess it's kind of a security thing. The first time it happened, I'm like, do I need to know this? I mean, it's nice to know. I don't know if you can turn it off, but
yeah. Well, the clipboard is protected now as part of the privacy thing, right? Like, if you go into settings, privacy, where is it? I know that maybe it's in the app stuff. Maybe you can't set this, but there is a thing where it says like you have to grant clipboard access to apps that are going to read it directly. When you're just pasting in, obviously that's okay, because that's you doing it. But some apps like the Deliveries app, which is a great app. That's my my go-to app for tracking shipping stuff, and it syncs and it's great. I have it on my iOS devices and also on my Mac, and it's all like Deliveries is awesome. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. That's a kind of a bonus cool stuff found there. But it will auto parse your clipboard when you launch the app. So, and it'll say, hey, it looks like you've got a UPS delivery or FedEx delivery on your clipboard. Do you want me to process that? Do you want me to add it to your list? Which is awesome. But it had to get permission with iOS 14 to talk to the clipboard and just automatically look at it like that. But yeah, I kind of like it. I mean, it's nice to get some confirmation that things came from where you thought they came from and all of that good stuff. So yeah, I like that. That was pretty cool. Yeah. Anything more on that?
Nope.
Okay. David brings us a question. I think this has to do with iOS 14, but I want to know more from y'all, actually. David says, I've been scouring the web and people are having issues with CarPlay, but no one seems to have nailed this, and I wanted to get your thoughts. I've tried just about everything from a new phone, a new cable, Apple original cables, cleaning out the ports, hard resets, etc. And my dealer states that there's no update on either end, on their end either. He says, the issue is that when I plug my iPhone into the port of my Chevy truck, sometimes it connects right away, sometimes not. I then engage in a flipping the cable, plugging and unplugging and other activities to get it to connect. It charges sometimes, but CarPlay doesn't engage. Other times, when it does connect, the slightest bump of the cable or iPhone immediately disconnects CarPlay, and then the game begins again. Many times I can't get it to reconnect at all. Any ideas? So you're not alone. At the very least, you're in a group of two, because I have been experiencing this too. And for me, it seems to have been in sync with when I updated my phone to iOS 14. I had betas on other devices, but my main phone, this time I waited. Normally I do the Golden Master, but like we mentioned last week, we didn't have to, because the Golden Master and the release were within, less than a day of each other. I have had all kinds of CarPlay issues in the past when I first got my CarPlay car, which is a Subaru Outback. And there were some known issues with the head units in that car. But then listener Kenny pointed out to us a few months ago that his dealer told him the automatic adapter, the little OBD2 onboard diagnostics, OBD2 port adapter that he had in his car was known to cause CarPlay issues. And of course, we all removed those from our cars because automatic went out of business. And that seemed to have solved any issues I was having, which, to be fair, at the time weren't all that frequent. Now, since iOS 14, that thing that David describes with like one little bump and it disconnects, that definitely seems to be happening all the time for me. Like I've had to really find a way to nestle my phone in so that doesn't happen. Yeah, I'm not sure. For me, often it requires, the unplug replug game, which is really fun to do while you're driving, by the way. And yeah, and or resetting the head unit, rebooting the head unit while I'm driving, which actually is way easier because I just hold the power button in on that car and it after 10 seconds or whatever, it reboots it. And then that usually deals with it for the rest of that ride. So yeah, there's something about the tolerance of the connection with CarPlay and iOS 14, I think. Let us know if you found anything. Feedback at macgeekgab.com.
Well, you could also send something to feedback at macgeekgab.com, Dave.
Yeah, okay, fair. But if neither of those works, then I would say try feedback at macgeekgab.com. Yes. Good stuff.
Yeah, I had it wasn't a CarPlay issue, but as far as I can tell, it was actually a bad lightning cable in my car, and I swapped the cable out. But it would, like, half the time when I plugged it in, my phone would, you'd see the little lightning bolt and it was charging. But it would only happen like half the time. Sometimes flipping it over, kind of like, was described here, would solve it. Sometimes it didn't. And I looked, and I think I could see some corrosion on one of the contacts. But I went to actually an Apple cable, and it was fine.
Yeah,
so.
That's good. It's good. Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, the cable quality matters for sure. Having either having an Apple cable or having an MFI certified cable makes a big difference, I've found, especially with CarPlay. But yeah, just in general, yeah, for sure. Yeah, but passing data without MFI certification, things are, who knows. I'll have to find a link for them. For my car, I like to have a coiled cable so that I can stretch it, but then it sort of, retracts into itself so it's not all over the place and like dangling on the floor and getting all mucked up or whatever. And so I found some on Amazon, MFI certified coiled cables that I like to use in the car. I'll find a link for them and put them in the show notes, because that's been, in fact, I probably need to order more, because I'm sure I did have a spare, and I tried that with this issue and nothing changed, but it did remind me that, maybe I need a second spare. The Boy Scout in me, I can't really repress it, John. It's, I know we say don't get caught here, but really, a close second to that is the Scouts motto of always be prepared, right? So I don't know. We have some stuff about like hot CPUs to talk about. We've got some good follow-ups and maybe even some networking stuff if we can get to it. Very eager to get to all of this stuff. And I am very eager to tell you about our sponsors for today, if that works for you, Mr. John F. Braun.
Please.
All right. Our first sponsor today is Otherworld Computing at MacSales.com and their new Thunderbolt 3 mini dock. So this is a 5-in-1 Thunderbolt 3 adapter that allows you to connect 2 4K displays, 2 USB storage and desktop accessory devices, and has a Gigabit Ethernet port on it, all with one Thunderbolt cable. I mean, this is the beauty of Thunderbolt, right? Is you can do all of these things. You got lots of bandwidth, but you also kind of have that main line to the motherboard that gives you the option of adding all these different interfaces across that high-speed link. Really cool. And of course, Otherworld Computing, anytime I have a Thunderbolt question, they are the people I go to. Like, they know Thunderbolt. They research this stuff. They figure out what they can do, how to do it right. And they do this with everything that they do. But I know that they do it with Thunderbolt because I've had these conversations with them. And they always have the answers. In fact, sometimes they blow me away with their answers. And it's because they care, right? They are geeks like us, but they're geeks about that stuff in like specifically. They're also geeks about logistics and shipping and customer service and all the other things that matter to running a business like that. They get it. They know what they have to be good at, and they are good at all of those things. There's a reason that I say they are the first place that John and I go when it's time to add something to our Macs. And it's because of all those things. So you can do it too. Go to macsales.com. Check out the new Thunderbolt 3 mini dock. Check out everything else they have. Our thanks to Otherworld Computing for sponsoring this episode. All right. So we all know that our VPNs protect our privacy and security online, right? They create that secure tunnel through which all of our stuff travels, all our data travels, not all of our stuff, just our data. But that's important because data is our stuff these days. Well, because of that, the way it works is your endpoint, the point at which it appears you're accessing the internet, is somewhere over there, not at your house or wherever it is you happen to be. And so you get to choose when you use ExpressVPN, our next sponsor here at expressvpn.com/mgg. You get to choose your endpoint. And so, for example, when I wanted to watch Star Trek Discovery on Netflix and it wasn't on US Netflix, okay, well, I can just make my endpoint in the UK, and now I can watch Star Trek Discovery on UK Netflix. Or you can watch Rick and Morty on France Netflix, or, you know, lots of other things, right? Like the offerings are different in different places, and this is a way that you can sort of get there. It also works if you happen to be traveling and you want to watch something on your US Netflix. If you're out of the country, right? You use ExpressVPN, you tunnel back in, you can see your stuff. They make it super easy. There's a reason that we've been using ExpressVPN here for years. We started using them because they were a sponsor. We kept using them because it works, it's fast, and it's super easy. Like one click on my Mac, one click on my iPhone, one click on my iPad. I mean, they work with everything. And I'm done. Like, that's it. I'm all connected. So you got to check it out. And if you visit our special link right now, as I said before, expressvpn.com/mgg, you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. So you can support the show, you watch what you want, and you can protect yourself at expressvpn.com/mgg. Our thanks to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this episode. Look, I know a lot of you are parents like I am, and certainly one of the things that we, as parents, we worry about our kids. And one of the recent things, you know, for the last several months, 6 months, that's kind of kept me like thinking and wondering is, what does school look like for my kids? How is this new abnormal affecting my kids' education, right? And transitioning, as they did in the spring, you know, almost like at the drop of a hat from being in a classroom for 7 hours a day to learning from home has been, you know, it's difficult. So there's ways, though, that we have found to keep the kids engaged. And this was helpful over the summer. It can be helpful with your kids now. Go get creative and enroll your kid in Varsity Tutors, because Varsity Tutors delivers free live enrichment classes taught by experts that make learning fun. And so, like, some of these classes are cool, right? They've got hundreds of free online classes. There's a class by Dr. Doug Newton, who is a child psychiatrist, chief medical officer of Sundermind. Will the kids be all right? Navigating an unprecedented back-to-school season. This sounds like it's more for me. Like, this is a class I want to take, and you can, right? There's nothing that stops you from doing that. They've got a class on artificial intelligence, expert instructors from Data Robot. Very cool stuff, and you can go check this out. So to reserve your spot in a free class, go to varsitytutors.com/mgg. That's varsitytutors.com/mgg, spelled just like it sounds. And that way you can give your child the confidence and the keys to success today. At where? varsitytutors.com/mgg. Our thanks to Varsity Tutors for doing what they're doing, offering so much for free, and for sponsoring this episode. All right, John, let's do some of the CPU stuff. Chris writes, he says, my 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro has been suffering the past couple of weeks with the fans ramping up within hours of booting up. And once they fired up, I noticed that sharing D is taking around 100% CPU, so I force quit it. This may or may not help. Sometimes I also have to quit Mail and or Safari before things settle down. Have you seen anyone else report anything like this? Any ideas of a fix rather than the Band-Aid that I'm using now? Previously, I've left my laptops on 24 hours a day for weeks now, and now I have resorted to shutting down each night to avoid overheating while I'm asleep. So I did some scouring on this, John, and I can't find what sharing D does. So I looked on my Mac, and it appears to be doing a lot with address book databases. And I figured this out by opening up Activity Monitor, finding sharing D, double-clicking sharing D, and then going to the open files and ports listing and going to the bottom of that. That'll tell you what the most recently opened files are, and it's live updates, right? So if things change, it'll show you. It'll also show you, the reason it says ports is it'll show you network connections that the app is making. So it can be really handy for digging into things exactly like this. And so I saw a lot of things in there about address book and all my address book databases being open and active with sharing D. So my question back to Chris would be, do you have any issues with your contacts database? And one of the issues, and I'm using air quotes here, might be that you have more than one contacts server syncing with your contacts database. For whatever reason, I find, if I just have iCloud, John, it's totally fine. If I have like a Google contacts syncing, I see things, churning and my CPU's whirring a lot more. So, and I don't know why that is. I don't think it's just my problem, but it could be. Maybe it's also Chris's problem. So that would be the place to look. But that's kind of the way to, when you're seeing a process that's going nuts and you're not sure what it does, dig into it that way with Activity Monitor, and then you can see. So I don't know. What do you think?
Sharing D, I know what it does.
Okay, cool.
How do I know what it does, Dave? You may ask.
Would you like me to ask?
Well, I'll spoil it. Let's surprise.
Okay.
Go to the terminal and type man sharing D. Here's what it does. So based on what the manual page says, I find it kind of weird that it's an address issue. At first, I thought it was the sharing system preference.
Sure, but it's not.
Like, maybe look there. But no, sharing D is interesting. So sharing daemon that enables AirDrop, handoff, instant hotspot, shared computers, and remote disk in the Finder.
Okay. It sure seems to be opening
iCloud devices.
I mean, it sure seems to be opening, like, I would say on this machine, 60% of the files that it has open, okay, maybe 80% of the files that it has open are related to address book. Now, you might need address book for this, right? Maybe it's using address book to find out your iCloud ID because that's how it does handoff, right? I mean, I'm just looking at one thing, but yeah, it's also got a single file open called the AirDrop hash DB that presumably is for some of this, but then it's got like core phone numbers and then more address book and then contacts and security messages. Okay, there's another one. So interesting. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing, if there's a sharing d.p list somewhere, maybe that's messed up. I don't know.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
Well, yeah, although I would think I would see that in the open files and ports.
Right.
But it could be there, and I'm just haven't seen it because that would not, seeing a plist file with the name of the app would not jump out at me as like, I would expect that, but I'm not seeing it. So one thing, this listing's pretty small. It's maybe only 3 pages worth, so it's fairly easy to scroll through as I'm doing now. But you can copy the contents of this and paste it into, BB Editor, your favorite text editor or whatever, and then you can search. the contents of this there and look for things like that so that you're not actually just having to let your eyes do it. The computers tend to be better at those things than we meager humans. So there you go. Yeah, interesting. So there you go. That's there you go. That's how it works. All right. We might have a follow-up here from Dave Ginsburg in the chat. Yes. Okay. So Dave is telling us how to move an app. So on the iPhone, back to what we were talking about before with the searching on the iPad. On the iPhone, you go to the app library, and if you find the app that you want there, push and hold on it, and then you can drag it from the app library, not from the search results, but from the app library out to the your home screens and put it wherever you want. And Dave rocks, because not only did Dave provide this real-time feedback while we were recording, Dave tweeted a video of showing us exactly how to do this. So I will put a link to this video in the show notes. That's awesome. And if I had set up a way to show the video in the live video stream, I would do that, but I didn't. And so I'm not going to, but I probably could. Could I? I mean, would it be that hard? Let's see what happens. So we'll try a moment here. Bear with us, our audio listeners, because we got to try experiments every now and then. So I'm going to put this link into a web browser here, and then I'm going to make the web browser live. Oh, great. And of course, Mimo Live says this browser is no longer supported. So
look at that.
So I don't think we get to do this, but maybe we do. Yeah, I think we do anyway. So there goes Dave's video, and I believe it's displaying. Oh, maybe it's not displaying. Nope. I think it's just showing all black. That's too bad. All right. Well, we learn things. It's fine. It's all good. We'll bring John and I back. So you can, I will put a link. Dave says to drag from app library to home screen, and I will put this in the show notes. So I need to figure out a better way to get Twitter videos into to our live stream. But we try things. We experiment. We fail. We learn. It's good. 5 things. All right, good. I feel like I've definitely hit my 5 already, John. But we have more questions about CPU and things like that. So let's go to Rob if we can here. And Rob asks, he says, is there a way to interpret kernel log crash reports? He says, my brand new Mac Mini crashes about 1 time a week and I can't pinpoint it. So again, this is one of those things where I find it's worth looking in the crash logs to see if anything jumps out at me. And also by doing that each time I do encounter one of these, I learn to know what normal looks like, right? Like I really feel like we humans are so good at pattern recognition. Like it is how we get through our days. Our brains are wired to recognize patterns and ignore them for us, right? Like that's why sometimes you can't find the thing that's sitting right there that's been sitting there for a long time, because your brain has said, well, you don't need to process this data. Like you have, if we processed every bit of input that came in, we would be overwhelmed. So our brains are great at pattern recognition. And so you can train that, right? Machine learning, and you train your pattern recognizer by throwing patterns at it. So that's why I talk about, learn what normal looks like. Look at all these things so that when there's an anomaly, it will jump out at you, and you'll get better at this. That being said, I looked at the particular crash report that Rob sent in, and I didn't see anything that jumped out at me. A lot of these are pretty nebulous, so I hesitate to speculate anything. But I would. Again, because our brains are really good at this pattern things, better than we even realize sometimes, my question to people when they say, oh, my computer's doing this weird thing and there's nothing obvious that I can see from anything that either they're providing or that I'm just seeing, is I always ask, is there anything that you do with this particular Mac where you notice yourself hesitate, like before you click? Like it could be as simple as like opening an email or, going to file new instead of hitting Command N. Like, is there anything that you've learned to do because you like feel like that's the thing that might cause a problem? Because a lot of times you're right. Like that can, tug on that thread a little bit and you might be able to find what it is. So I don't know. I didn't mean to get into weird psychology, but it's how we do things. So we got to leverage the things we're good at. I don't know. What do you do when you look at a kernel panic log, John?
Yeah, this usually I haven't seen one for a while, but usually they'll specify recently loaded and unloaded kernel extensions, and I don't see that in this one.
Yep.
But if you do see this looks like just a generic crash or the OS crashed.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Because I don't see the name of anything. Now, a lot of times when people have, or I've seen some in the past, and sometimes you can glean who may be responsible for it based on the kernel extensions that were recently loaded or unloaded.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that.
Like one I saw one time, you'll see like HID in it, which is human interface device. That's probably a USB thing.
Yes. Right.
For example.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the weird thing about this one, Dave, here, that I don't know why we're seeing this here. But the kernel version, you see that line in there?
Yes.
Notice something there? ARM64? Why is ARM64 running on the...
What?
The kernel version has the word ARM64 in it. See?
I see that. And I don't know if that's abnormal, right? I've never, the version of the kernel isn't something that would cause or not cause a crash, right? So I've happily ignored that all the time. But that is interesting because unless, he's asking about a Mac Mini. Is he asking about a development Mac Mini?
I'm wondering if this is a development Mac Mini.
That's interesting. Yeah. Huh. Now I have to find some kernel logs and look to see if mine say ARM60. Well, wait a minute. You can get that from the terminal uname-a. Yeah. So on my computer, if you do a uname-a from the terminal, that portion, it's a big long thing, but again, this is how you look. But looking at that big long thing, is it the same version of the kernel? 19.6.0. Yes. Mine's from Thursday, June 18th. His is from Thursday, July 9th. And mine ends in release x86-64.
As does my Mini.
So all right.
I think this is a development Mac Mini.
This is why we don't share
Apple Silicon.
This is why we don't share your last names here, folks. Because we don't want you to get caught. So that may be the reason. That's interesting. Fascinating. Yeah. Yeah, he says, my brand new Mac Mini. I wonder if that was his way of telling us brand new, That's really interesting. Although, does Big Sur say release ARM64? Although you'd think that would be a newer kernel version. I don't know. Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. Interesting things to check out.
And, and Alex asked the question. Yeah. Another thing, RAM.
Yes.
Reseat your RAM if it's reseatable, which I think the Mini, you can still play with the memory, right?
You can. It not officially. But it's not just like one screw and you're at the RAM. I think it's like a 20-minute tour in and out. It's not terrible, but technically it is not user replaceable. But you can't. But it is. It's not soldered. You can take it out and put it back in. Yes. So.
Yeah. So test your RAM maybe.
Yeah.
Or reseat your RAM.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. All right, we'll circle back here again, staying on CPU and perhaps showing my own bias about the first one from Chris. Is this the same one? Yeah, it is the same one. All right, John, you. So I'm not going to do that one. I guess I listed the same item on the agenda two different ways. That's great. You had an issue with your laptop this week.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've had this problem ever since. Here's the warning. Don't mount your I made a mistake. So I looked at the Big Sur beta and I put it on an external drive and I booted from it. What I shouldn't have done, Dave, was to mount the internal drive on my MacBook Pro.
From within Big Sur.
Which I did. Yes.
Now, this was an early beta of Big Sur. We don't know if the problem
correct.
that you're experiencing would be happening with current betas, just to throw it all out there. Yeah.
Yeah. But what was happening is that over time, my Time Machine backups would be getting longer and longer and longer, and they would sit at the towards the end of the process. You'll see a line that says, backing up, and then the amount of data, and that number would keep increasing, and it would sometimes take hours for it to. And also, the number was like really big, like tens of gigabytes, and I'm like, usually. That I don't have that much data changing state from Time Machine backup to Time Machine backup. If anything, it's like on the order of hundreds of megabytes. So there was something up with the disk. And Disk Utility said this message, which I think was the core of my problem. Warning, container has been mounted by APFS version 164.0.0.0, which is newer than 1412.141.1. And I'm like, oh boy. So APFS touched my internal drive and I think screwed something up, because the other error that I would get after that was some sort of allocation error, and there would be like hundreds of them. And at some point it's like, I'm not going to show you any more of these because there's too many of them. But I think that was the cause of the issue. Now, fortunately, I make a carbon copy clone of my internal drive. The thing is, Big Sur didn't touch that drive, nor should it. And when I ran Disk Utility on that drive, I didn't get any of these crazy errors. And I'm like, you know what? Let's restore from the clone to the internal drive, and that fixed the problem.
That's awesome.
It was a bit nerve-wracking because I basically erased my internal drive, and then once you boot from the carbon copy cloner, it'll be like, oh, it looks like you booted from clone. You want to help me, you want me to restore to somewhere else? And I'm like, yeah, please. And that fixed the problem. Now, when I run Time Machine, so one, they complete, within minutes, not hours. And number two, the amount of data that it says it's backing up is much more reasonable when compared to before. So
this is interesting. So it was truly the structure of the disk, not any of the user data, because you basically took you cloned and then restored that immediate clone, and then everything was fine.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a great way to solve that problem, because you lost nothing in theory, right? Yeah, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. All right. I like it. That's a good solution. I wonder if that would be, I wonder what would have happened if you updated your external drive to the latest Big Sur beta and did the same thing. If that would have fixed, it. Like if you booted from the newest Big Sur beta and did the same thing, just mounted your Catalina drive, would that have gone in and been like, aha, I caused a problem, let me fix it, right? I don't know, would that have been another way to get there? Because presumably, once Big Sur is, golden mastered or released, it will not be causing these problems if it mounts a drive from an older OS. I mean, that would be no bueno, because that's going to happen all the time, I would think, or not all the time, but frequently enough that Apple wants to avoid that. So interesting. Well, nice fix, man. That's good. I like it. All right. Wayne has a question for us. Take it away, Wayne.
Hey, guys. Wayne Henderson here in Southern California, and I need your help because I can no longer create reminders via Siri. In fact, I haven't been able to do so since around the time of the changeover of Apple's systems due to Catalina, since my laptop at the time is stuck 2 versions behind. So I selected the proper option, I think, at the time to not upgrade to the new whatever system they were using for reminders. Anyway, tried everything. Signed in and out of iCloud on my iPhone 8 Plus, my 3rd gen Apple Watch, and on my 2010 MacBook Pro. I even reset the network settings on my iPhone. No luck. Fast forward several frustrating months. I now have a 2020 MacBook Air and an iPhone 11 and still my 3rd gen Apple Watch. And everything is modern and up to date and current and everything, except, guess what, gentlemen? I still can't create reminders with Siri on my Apple Watch nor on my iPhone 11. What the heck is going on? You're my only hope, as they say. And here's where I was going to try to have Siri create a reminder to have you cut me off, but, well, you know.
Yeah. I wish we had an answer for you. It should work. I'm curious. I know this question came in before iOS 14 was a thing. Like, I wonder if that resolved this for you. I didn't have any trouble. I waited to convert to the new reminders for quite some time. Once that transition happened last year, and it I did not have a problem before, and I don't have a problem now. So it's not a universal problem with the scenario you're in. It's a specific problem with your setup or devices. But I'm happy to throw this one out as a geek challenge if anybody has an idea other than, nuke and pave the affected device as. I don't know. You have any better thoughts, John? I always hate nuke and pave as the answer, but because it's not necessarily always the answer. But
right.
Yeah. Any thoughts?
No.
Okay. It's a geek challenge. John, you want to take us to Charles?
Yeah, and I don't know. Charles may require a nuke and pave for this, but
okay.
A friend's wedding anniversary showed up in my Apple Calendar. Perhaps Siri decided to pull it from my contacts. I don't need that information, so tried to delete it. What I got was the error, and he gave a screenshot of the error, and here it's kind of fuzzy, but okay, here we go. You can't change events in the contacts calendar. Only the calendar administrator and any delegates with permission can make changes to read-only calendars. To make changes to the calendar, contact the calendar administrator.
Huh.
I've checked with Google and Apple. As I am my computer's administrator and users and group, I should be able to delete this. Also, the online information doesn't make it clear how to find delegates, a term I've never seen in relation to Apple's calendar. I went back to my contacts and deleted the anniversary information and restarted both calendar and contacts, but I still can't delete the event. I also double-checked that my permissions are set correctly for both programs. As administrator, I have read-write access for both. So what's up? The first thing that came to my mind, Dave, is that if it is a Siri item being placed on the calendar, I didn't see this part of his screen, but when I look at my setup, Dave, if you click on the calendars button in the calendar program, you're going to see a bunch of different calendars, home, and like I have Mac Geek Gab,
sure,
things like that. I also saw one called Siri Suggestions, Dave. So maybe disabling that will make it go away. But I had a Siri Suggestions in my other category. So one, uncheck that and see if that goes away. You can also right-click on Siri Suggestions and say delete. So maybe try that if you want to delete a Siri suggestion.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Otherwise, Dave.
Yeah, that whole delegates thing is from sharing access to your calendar. It's throwing up an erroneous message, or a misleading message, I should say. It's not necessarily wrong. It's just not about that. So I could I could have a calendar and delegate you read-only access to it, John, and then you would, if you tried to modify something on it, you'd presumably get this message or something very much like it saying, hey, you have to talk to the administrator. But this is more like the administrator is the system, and the system always wins, So, well, it sounds like we got 2 geek challenges here.
I mean, the other thing, similar to, the mail issue that we solved a while ago, disabling the service or services and getting rid of the local data.
Yeah.
And then re-enabling may rebuild the data. And as far as I can tell, Dave, so contacts, there's a blast from the past. The data for that is in home, library, application support, address book.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Not contact. And then the calendar data is in home, library, calendars.
One level up. Interesting.
But yeah. So that maybe that data is corrupt, and maybe renaming or wiping it will rebuild it, and you won't get this crazy error anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah, be careful in both cases, of course. Export the data or back it up before you.
Yeah.
I don't know. So kind of another geek challenge, I guess.
I guess so. Yeah.
I've never seen that message.
No, I haven't tried to.
Let us know.
Yeah, please let us know. Yeah. I love our Mac Geek Gab community, John. It's because we are one big family and we all happily help each other. And you folks provide as much of the information as we do. We are simply the stewards and the funnel of all this. In the chat room, while this show's been happening, listener Alex has been helping listener Paul with an issue. And Paul asked, while we were talking, John, about the mounting of all these disks and the mounting of the internal disk. And he says, Paul said, it's as annoying as heck that as of Catalina, my Mac Mini will automatically mount my internal disk, even though I always boot from an external drive. Pre-Catalina, it would prompt me for a password and I could cancel. And he says, I do this as protection. And listener Alex chimed in and, started asking some questions like you do to get a little more information, and says, Paul says, yeah, currently I do an unmount each time I reboot the Mini. So Alex's solution to this was to use something called disk-arbitrator, John, which I've never heard of before. You can install it with Homebrew or presumably many other package managers. But the README for it says disk-arbitrator is a Mac OS X forensic utility designed to help the user ensure correct forensic procedures are followed during imaging of a disk device. But apparently it comes with lots of different things, and one of them is that you can unmount disks easily. I have similar reasons. I don't want my clones to be mounted all the time. And so thank you, Alex, first of all, for helping Paul and sharing that. And we'll obviously put a link to this in the show notes. But I have the same thing when I boot, my external drives all mount. Well, one of my external drives is my clone, and I don't want my clone mounted all the time because when I do like spotlight searches, it will sometimes go and find things on the clone. Even though I tell it not to, it's like it doesn't matter. So, of course, I have Carbon Copy Cloner set to unmount the clone after it does its daily clone. However, between the time I reboot and when that clone happens, it's mounted unless I do something about it. So I wrote a little automator. I think I did it in Automator, that unmounts my clone. And I put that in startup items, or login items. So now when my Mac mounts or my Mac starts up and it logs me in, it automatically unmounts my clone and keeps everything happy. So you could try that as well, Paul, if you want to go that route. But thanks, Alex, for this, for the disk arbitrator thing. That's very, very cool. All right. Listener Jeff, I'll call him Listener Jeff, even though it's really just friend Jeff asked me this question, but it was a perfect little scenario. He uses LibreOffice as his, but none of this is about mail and attachments and permissions. His example is he uses LibreOffice to edit his Word and Excel documents. and he got an Excel file emailed to him. So he double-clicked the file, and LibreOffice happily launched because he has it set as his default for those types of files. And when it opened, it says, hey, document could not be locked. The lock file could not be created for exclusive access by LibreOffice due to missing permissions to create a lock file on that location. And it gave him the option of canceling, of course, or opening the file read-only. This is new as of Catalina, and it's part of the Catalina permissions that don't allow apps to just generally have full disk access. Your email attachments are not in your documents folder. They're not on your desktop. They're not in your downloads. They are buried in a folder in home, library, mail. I think it's actually home, library, mail attachments, isn't it, John? But it is in your library folder, wherever it is. Now I really want to look. I thought it was mail attachments, but maybe it's deeper than that. But anyway, it's somewhere in your library folder, and apps do not by default have access to this. Well, that's what you're being told here. And that's why LibreOffice is saying, hey, you just want me to open this read-only. The other solution would be to drag it out of your email and put it in somewhere in your documents folder or elsewhere, and then things can have access. Or if you really want to do this, you could give LibreOffice full disk access or whatever app you're running into with this problem. I don't recommend that with things that you're opening mail attachments from, because when I save them, if I'm just going to look at something, read only is fine, right? If I'm going to make a change to it, I do not want that change to be buried in some folder that I can't remember the name of while I'm doing a podcast, right? So it's better when I hit save on that read-only file. It's like, okay, now tell me where you want me to put it. I actually kind of like that. I realize it's built as a security feature, but I see it actually as also a convenience feature. But it is a little weird when you see that come up, that it's like, hey, I can't do anything here. It's like, yeah, okay. Just knowing that it's all right. And that's all I had to tell Jeff was like, yeah, don't worry about it. Actually, that's a good thing. He's like, oh, great. That's a good thing. So yeah, that's, but it is weird when that shows up for the first time. I've encountered that with several folks. So, All right, John, should we do some of these? Well, actually, you know what? Let's answer Gray's question, because I think for people ordering Apple Watches, this is a thing. Gray says, is there a significant difference between the Ion X glass and sapphire glass or crystals on the new Apple Watches? I'm speaking here of durability. I have a Series 3 with a sapphire crystal and have been impressed with the resistance to scratches. So yeah, there's definitely a difference, right? Sapphire we'll call it scratch proof. I'm sure you could find a way to scratch it with a diamond or something, right? But whereas Ion X is more scratch resistant than scratch proof, but definitely not as much as a sapphire crystal. However, Ion X glass is generally accepted to be more shatterproof than sapphire, though at those small sizes that you're getting on an Apple Watch, I'm not sure that it makes that much of a difference. Shatterproof starts to matter as the size, the surface area of the glass grows. And I've got a link to somebody that knows far more about this than me, and to the place where I sort of researched it, but which I'll put in the show notes. But you could always put a shield over it. And I've found these, $10 for a 2-pack watch shields, and on the surface, they look like they're going to appear to be very unwieldy and stuff. Once you've got it on your watch for a day, to me, it just disappears. I do not see it. So I will put that in the notes, and then you don't have to worry about it. So there you go. Yeah. Do you know any geekier details of the Sapphire versus Ion X, from a glass hardness standpoint? No. All right. You want to tell us about your NFC tag reader, John? With Steve?
Yeah. So we got to follow up Steve makes a good point. Pretty sure John must have an older phone. Well, yeah. Yes. So I have an iPhone 8. Modern phones can automatically detect NFC tags when the phone is near. Older ones required manual intervention. That's why newer phones don't have that control in the control center.
Right. Oh,
He's
back
right.
to last week's show. Right. Ah, okay. Got it.
Yeah, and I remember this when I was playing with this iTag product that I got at CES a couple of years ago. They said, all right, if you got a newer phone, just hold it up to the tag. If you got an older phone, you got to download our app. So
interesting. Okay. That makes sense.
So your phone, so if you hold your phone up to, I assume you have a newer, 11?
I have an 11 Pro, but I think this started with the 10S.
Yes, I think.
The 10 needed to be, you had to do what you have to do with launching the app, and the 10S did not, I think. But I have a 10 at the house that has been malfunctioning, I think with a faulty battery. So I'll mess with that and see. But I'm pretty sure, that's the case. So, yeah, that makes sense. Cool. All right. A tip from Michael, who says, I have a 27-inch 5K iMac with a 3 terabyte Fusion drive. Final Cut was giving me some problems, and Google Foo showed that it might be the Fusion drive. I had a Samsung 2 terabyte Thunderbolt drive, an X5, so I attached that and used Carbon Copy Cloner and copied my Fusion drive over to it. I then booted off of the Samsung X5, and it was fast and great. It was also out of space. So I moved my music off of the X5 and my iMazing backups off the X5 and got some space back. But the space always got reduced to 45 gigs no matter what I did. I forced a trim on the drive. I ran Clean My Mac, Space Lens, and it said I only had 700 gigs of files. So About This Mac storage showed that I used 1.45 terabytes of quote unquote other. I researched and looked and even called Apple, and no one had any idea. Then I read something about Carbon Copy Cloner APFS Snapshots. I launched Carbon Copy Cloner and on each drive deleted the snapshots and watched as the other shrank and shrank. I also found leftover Time Machine snapshots and deleted those as well. Apparently, what happens if you boot from a Carbon Copy clone and then turn it into your regular boot drive, all the leftover APFS snapshots are archived and just sit there taking up space. So yeah, managing your APFS snapshots and just being aware of them is huge. And you can do that in Carbon Copy Cloner. If you go and like on the left of the Carbon Copy Cloner, the Carbon Copy Cloner is the best interface for managing snapshots that I found. You can do it from the terminal, of course, with, I believe, disk-util. But I use Carbon Copy Cloner because I can see them, But if you go to your volumes list, which is on the bottom left in Carbon Copy Cloner, as long as you have the sidebar open, and if you don't, show it, and then it's on the bottom left. If you click on a drive, it will show you the snapshots that exist on that drive, and it will even show you how big they are if you give it enough time to go and size them for you. It'll give you all kinds of information about them and all of that good stuff. So you can restore from them, but you can also wipe them out. So if you see some big ones there, and I think you can even sort by size. Yeah. So, I've got one from August 26th that's like 5 gigs on the one drive I happen to be looking at. And it's like, okay. I mean, I don't need the space, so I'm okay leaving it. You can choose how Carbon Copy Cloner manages your snapshots, and so that's why there's this big one from 30 days ago or whatever it is. But yeah, so that's the thing. Just make sure you're managing them, make sure you're on top of them. Especially you, John, with what you just did with your restore and all that stuff. Just make sure it didn't inherit anything, and it's just good to look. Yeah. So there you go.
The other place you can see it. So I actually did this at one point, Dave. I was having some issue with my Mini, and I would install something, and then the machine wouldn't restart properly. It's like, oh, great. What did I break? If you go into recovery in the Time Machine section, that also lets you list your local snapshots.
Oh, right.
So what I did
System preferences.
Is,
Interesting.
No. Yeah. So recovery, Time Machine. If you go to that section of recovery, it also lists your local snapshots.
Wait, what recovery? Help me with this. What am I missing?
Recovery. Right. So you boot into recovery.
Oh, I got you now. Sorry. I'm caught up. Got it. So I boot into recovery mode and then go into Time Machine.
Right. And one of the options will be, if there are local snapshots, that's an option.
Ah, very cool. Okay.
So that's how I was like, oh man, do I have to do a full restore? I'm like, hey, wait. No, I don't have to do a full restore. Let me just go to the last local snapshot.
Right.
And it put it into, and then it booted. So it was a lot quicker than restoring from my clone. I mean, it was almost instantaneous. It's a neat feature. I wanted to mention it because, it's kind of hidden.
Yeah.
Is that, why did you put it in Time Machine? I mean, okay.
Yeah, well, Time Machine is the thing creating them usually.
Oh, right.
Right. Like, I mean, unless you have a third-party app also creating them, which, in this case you would. But yeah, interesting. Huh. Alex in the chat room says, go to About This Mac Storage and then click on Manage. He says that can, in the right cases, also do wonders. So, and he says it's often overlooked, which I would definitely agree with. So, yeah. Cool. You want to take us to Everett, John?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So Everett made me spend some money. So
awesome.
So Everett said, I recently bought a 34-inch ultra-wide monitor, and it came with HDMI and DisplayPort. I used a USB-C to HDMI cable at first, but the display never liked to wake up from sleep. I believe Dave had this issue in the past.
Yep.
So I then ordered a DisplayPort to USB-C cable and connected it that way. And all of a sudden, it worked flawlessly. It no longer felt like I was waking up a hibernating turtle when waking up my Mac Mini. So always remember to check your ports that are available to you. And I was like, I think I have one of those. And Dave, my OWC monitor.
OWC dock, you mean?
No, the monitor. The OWC monitor that I have has 2 HDMI ports and a display port. So I'm like, hey, I got one of those. So before I had the monitor hooked up to the HDMI port on my Mini, and I'm like, well, let me try this because it sounds like it's better. And actually, if you look in Mac Tracker or something, Thunderbolt or USB-C video is typically will get higher resolution than if you're using HDMI. So I was like, hey, I should get one of these cables. So I did a quick search online and something came up from Apple and it was like $50. And I'm like, yeah, it seems kind of expensive. Well, guess what, Dave? Amazon makes one. Amazon Basics, right?
Yep.
Amazon Basics aluminum USB-C to DisplayPort cable, 6 feet, was $15.
Oh, nice.
So I got one of those, and sure enough, Dave, it wakes up a heck of a lot quicker, and it detects it. And I had this. I don't know if there's a bug in the HDMI on the Mini or something, but every now and then, he said you mentioned you may have had this problem, but I would have situations where the screen just wouldn't wake up.
Totally.
My secondary screen would wake up, but my primary screen wouldn't. And sometimes sometimes if I unplugged it and replugged it, it would see it. Sometimes I actually had to cycle power on my dock to reset everything into a known state. So
I've been through that. Yeah. HDMI. We talked with the folks. I assume you meant monoprice display, not OWC displays.
Oh, right. Yes, I'm sorry.
That's
Monoprice.
okay. But we had talked to the folks at Monoprice about this, and there was a thing about like the 10-bit frame rate controller versus an 8-bit frame rate controller, and sometimes the data wouldn't get passed right. But yeah, having DisplayPort as opposed to HDMI tends to be a lot more reliable with Macs for whatever reason. So yeah, very good. Cool. Nice find. I put a link to that in the show notes for everybody so they can find your same cable there. Listener Bob also has a follow-up about HDMI. We were talking a couple of episodes ago and with Todd, he said where Todd was having dramatic color changes between using HDMI and DisplayPort to connect his monitor. He says, one thing I didn't hear mentioned in the set of potential solutions was checking the HDMI picture mode on his monitor. Typically, HDMI monitors are designed with a number of different picture mode options, such as normal, vivid, calibrated, dark, etc. The differences between modes can be very dramatic. Perhaps Todd should check to see if his monitor has those picture modes and choose one that better matches his preferences. So that's really, yeah, that could be it, right? Because oftentimes with a display, your different inputs can have different picture modes assigned to them, and you might just have, some wonky picture mode selected for whatever input you're on. So yeah, it's a good one. Thank you, Bob. Good stuff. Where are we?
Oh,
yeah, go ahead, man.
And the other thing, you had me check this out at one point, Dave. Depending on the capabilities of your monitor, you may have an HDR checkbox.
Right. That's right. Well, your Mac and your monitor, right? Because it's like it needs to be the right version of Mac OS, it needs to be the right Mac, and it needs to be the right monitor.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm looking right now in displays, and on the monoprice one, I have that checkbox on my Asus backup screen. There is no checkbox because it doesn't do HDR.
Got it. Where do you see that checkbox in the display system preference? Which of the tabs?
Right below the rotation tab.
So is this is this on the display tab or the color tab?
Display.
Okay, so the first tab. Okay, interesting. I don't have rotation, nor do I have HDR on either of my screens.
Oh,
that's interesting. But you said you found, which makes sense because it's the same with the TV. HDR controls your brightness for you, right? Your brightness and contrast for you, so you can't control it for yourself. Is that right?
On this screen, it does.
That makes sense.
On my LG TV, I have HDR and I can control the brightness. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why I don't know if it's a bug in the firmware or what, but
well, usually
I actually don't have HDR enabled on this screen. And Dave, I mean, it's a beautiful screen.
Sure.
I don't want I don't need the HDR.
Sure. Yeah, well, I think that's part of the spec, like with Dolby Vision and things like that. Like there's somewhere in there, it's like, well, the filmmaker decided to do this, so we're just going to control your screen for you. At least that's as I understand it. I've said more than I know, to quote John Martellero. So,
okay,
I always like that quote. All right, let's see. Yeah, we've got time to make it through some of these things here. Listener John says, we were talking in show 830 about HomeKit and how I'm using Hoobs and all of that stuff, John, and how it's great to have everything together. And listener John pointed out, he says, one thing you didn't mention is HomeKit's automation. He says, I love the HomeKit automations, and most of things are about, leaving and returning to do lights. And you can have some things where it you do an automation based on a trigger and then 10 minutes later do a different automation. It's got some nice little linking together. I still have Amazon A-Lady as the sort of the hub for all of my automations, just because I don't want to rely on a single point of failure of like Hoobs. If the engine shuts down, now suddenly my lights aren't turning on and off and things like that. So I've been fine with the A-Lady for it, but I could also link A-Lady into Hoobs, right? Like that Hoobs is not just for HomeKit. So thank you, John. That's good. Good stuff. You want to share this tip about RAM in an iMac, John?
Yeah, well, this is wacky. When the so Dan says, when the 2020 27-inch iMac came out, I thought it was time for me to finally upgrade my 2011 21-inch iMac. When I ordered the new iMac, I kept it at the base 8 gigabytes of RAM and then ordered 16 gigabytes of RAM from OWC. I plan to keep the original 8 gigs in their original slots and install the 16 gigs from OWC in the other slots, or having 4848. Something I had done successfully with my 2011 iMac. However, when I added the 16 gigs, I was surprised to see the memory speed dropped from 2667 megahertz to 2133 megahertz. And actually, you can find that if you go to System Info Memory, you'll see the speed at which the memory is being run.
Huh.
Some websites have stated that to keep the memory at 2667 in the new iMacs, that you needed to put the Apple RAM in slots 1 and 2 and the third-party RAM in slots 3 and 4. Doing this, however, prevents dual-channel swapping. At the Mac Rumors iMac forum, several posters noted that the new iMac appears to be quite finicky regarding RAM, and that you need to remove the original RAM when adding third-party RAM if you want optimal performance. So I set aside my original 8 gigs of RAM from Apple and went solely with the OWC, which is now running at 2667 with dual-channel swapping. In fact, I have ordered another 16 gigs of RAM from OWC to go with the 16 gigs I previously ordered.
Huh. That's really weird. So I'm on a 2019 iMac here, John. And evidently I did exactly what Dan did. I added I bought the 8 gigs because, and then I bought, I bought 32 from OWC, 2 16s, and I put those in 1 and 3. So 0 and 2 had slots 0 and 2, so we would call them slots 1. But the first and third slot have the original Apple RAM at 4 gigs apiece, and then the second and fourth slots have the 16s in them from OWC, and everything's running at 2667. So yeah, they changed something with the 2020 iMac. That's bizarre. Huh.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm looking here, and the RAM in my Mini is also running at 2667.
Yep.
Oh, and this is interesting. Upgradable memory. Yes.
Oh, it says that. No kidding. Huh.
To our point before is, so the Mini, so this Mini advertises that the memory is upgradable. Okay, well, that's nice.
Huh.
And I'm almost certain that it's not on my MacBook Pro.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah.
That you have, that whatever decision you make, you're stuck with forever.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So weird that the memory that I assume both memories were, I don't know why the Apple memory is fighting with the other memory. That's really weird.
Yeah, that is weird. Huh.
I remember long ago, I think it was the Titanium, the Tie Book. Remember the Tie Book?
Yeah.
I remember Apple had a weird thing. Also, something where if you upgraded the firmware, all of a sudden it would complain about the memory being out of spec, and it's like, no, you were fine before this. They tightened the
the spec on it.
Yeah, and I remember that. And you remember, there was an outrage. It's like, why does updating the firmware all of a sudden, disable my RAM?
Right.
It's like, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that was, and to their credit, all of the RAM vendors we knew of at the time, which obviously was OWC, Ramjet, some blast from the past names, Memory to Go, all of the, and I'm just remembering off the top of my head, but all the RAM vendors were great about it. They just swapped out your RAM, even if you'd bought it years and years before, because they all have lifetime warranties on it. So that was weird. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Oh, well, this is nice. All right. Alex actually found a post here from Apple saying as much.
Okay.
DIMMs should be the same capacity, speed, and vendor.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, Apple's weird about stuff like this, man. It's weird. They do offer us some cool things, though. As James points out, he says, in 831, we were answering one of Scott's questions about doing diagnostics on your Mac. And James says, I'm sure lots of you, and probably perhaps even the two of you, listen to ATP, Accidental Tech Podcast. Absolutely. And he says, so you may have already received this feedback, but apparently you can hold Option D at startup to pull the latest hardware diagnostics for that Mac from the internet. Then when that completes, you can hold Command E to run the extended hardware test. Be warned, though, the extended diagnostics time was a little over 180 minutes for my little baby 2017-inch MacBook. So thanks for that, James. Yeah, absolutely. That's the Option D and Command E for sure. We will put that in the show notes for
and I got an update.
Yeah.
On that. You don't need to do it. This also works from the regular diagnostics.
The Command E, the extended hardware test.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Right. But if you do Option D, you get the latest diagnostics. But you're right. Yeah. Either existing or latest will do the.
Yeah, because I was curious because there's no menus in the diagnostics screen. It just comes up and says, "Hey, I'm running diagnostics."
Right.
But sure enough, if I held down Command E, and on my MacBook Pro, it took like an hour to do the extended test.
Interesting. Option D, not Command D.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
So it's okay. D, D by itself on startup should just launch the built-in diagnostics, and then Option D is if you want the internet diagnostics. All right, we'll put that link in the show notes too. John, I think that brings us to the end of things here. It's just, it's how it goes. It's just how it goes. Time is what it is. We still choose to live in a world where time is linear and consistent. Yeah, some days are better than others with that. So I don't know, man. We do have some premium subscribers who have had contributions come in recently that I would like to thank. You can learn about that at macgeekgab.com/premium. Roger Y. Randy from Westport. Sharon from Wesley Chapel in Florida. Robbie from Hendersonville, Martin from Carlsbad, Stephen from Plainfield, Robert from Columbiana, Barry from, I don't know where Barry is, but I know Barry's been doing a little bit of flying. In fact, Barry was in your very studio not that long ago. Joseph from Marietta, James from Melville, Royce from Ewa Beach, I think, or Ewa Beach. I'm not sure. It's in Hawaii. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Anyway, Jeff from Chesterton, Andrew from Honolulu, also in Hawaii. David from Plainsboro, Frank from Tunbridge, Michael from Spencer, Fernando F. Mystery. David from Owensboro, Jeffrey from Windsor, Clive from Burgess Hill, Scott from Bourbonnais, David from Mount Prospect, Matthew from Forked River, Dave from Saugerties, Michael from Robbins, Erica from Netcong, Don from Lake Forest, William from Gettsville, my apologies, Craig from Costa Mesa, Ken from Honolulu. So several out there in Hawaii. Hope you're all doing okay. Hope everybody's doing okay. John from Wake Forest, Chris from Chorleywood, Santiago from Palm City, Jim from San Jose, Brian from Danbury, Graham from Glebe, Mike from Tempe, Timothy from Hendersonville, and Timothy from West Windsor, Bob from La Peche, Tim from Des Moines, Joe from Redondo Beach, Philip from Tucson, Domenico from Holbrook, Daniel from University Place, Ari from Kensington, John from Sonora, David from Chicago. Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody. Nick from Mount Clemens, Abdullah from Reisterstown, James from San Antonio, Bob, Dr. Mac Levitis with his Working Smarter for Mac users from Austin, Peter from Auburn, Abel from Santa Rosa, Brian from Bayville, Neil from West Hartford, Alan from Burbank, Pierre Timo with a question earlier in the show too, or a tip even, Drake from Honolulu, wow, Eric from Albuquerque, Mark from Milford, Paul from Fishers, Ward from Mesa, Joe B., Gary from Babylon, Anthony from Ride, John from Houston, Robert from Oro Valley, Luann from Albuquerque, Eric from Trondheim, Matt from Midlothian. I love saying Midlothian. It's got a good mouthfeel. Jason from Charleston, Douglas S., Daniel from London, Jeff S., Olga from Bellevue, and Everett from Marina. You all rock. Thank you so much to everybody who is able to and interested in contributing to our premium program. It all comes together. And thanks to all of you. Thanks for listening. First and foremost, that really is the thing that is the biggest help, to be perfectly honest. Everything stems from there. And then sending in your questions. Thanks for that. Your tips, all that stuff. Obviously, it all really works. Tell a friend about the show. That's I would love it if you did that. So that's what I have to say. John, what do you have to say, my friend? Anything?
Thank you.
There you go.
Everyone.
Okay. Anything to add before we move on here?
Yeah. Another definition of time, Dave.
I love it.
I don't know if you remember this, but I actually dug it up here. QuickTime had an Easter egg where if you hovered over the QuickTime extension, it would say the following: time, a non-spatial continuum in which events occur in apparently irreversible succession from the past through the present to the future.
Yeah. Apparently irreversible. I love this. I love this. That's awesome. That's outstanding. Nice find. That's great. That's great. A blast from the past. Just to stick with the time theme, right? Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to CacheFly for providing all the bandwidth to get the show from us to you. Thanks, of course, to all of our sponsors, the ones we mentioned in the episode. VarsityTutors.com/MGG, ExpressVPN.com/MGG, Otherworld Computing at MacSales.com. Of course, our ongoing sponsors, Eero.com/MGG. Very excited about their new Wi-Fi 6 stuff. Can't wait to test it and learn and all that stuff. Linode.com/MGG, Barebones.com, Smilesoftware.com/podcast. Just to change it up a little bit. That's what we got. John, what do you got?
Dave?
How you doing?
All right.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
But I want to share some advice, Dave. And the advice I have for you and for everyone who's listening and watching is don't get caught.
Made up.